The Yorkshire coast has seen the ebb and flow of fishing communities since settlements were first established here. They are noted today for their variety. The small picturesque villages of Staithes, Robin Hood's Bay and Filey, the busy towns of Scarborough, Whitby and Bridlington, and the major fishing port of Hull. Despite periods of fluctuating economic fortune, the fishing industry continued to thrive until the 1960s, but by the 1970s it entered a phase of almost irreversible decline. Books and articles about fishing communities have a tendency to highlight the activities of men and boats, not least because of the danger associated with their work. But where are the women? There are some, such as the visiting Scottish herring girls and the Yorkshire flither pickers, girls who collected limpets from the shore to use as bait on fishing lines. But by and large, the women are absent from the history. The interviews in this film are part of a project aimed at letting the women speak for themselves about their experiences of life in the Yorkshire fishing communities. We will be looking at 5 areas: childhood memories, home life, the knitting of ganses, social life and entertainment, and beliefs and practices. Of the women interviewed, some were children during the 1920s and 30s. Others grew up during the war years, and yet others had their childhood during the 1950s and 60s. For the most part, the bustling life of these communities has now passed, but the memories remain.
Life in a fishing family when I was young was absolutely fantastic. Looking back, there was characters that Giles Dickens himself couldn't have made up or created. It was hard work. Your dad was always at work, but it was a family hard work.
I can remember going to Bridlington to pick some crabs up, because obviously sometimes they didn't catch any down here to buy off the market. So we used to go through to Bridlington with one of the lads in the vans, and it was full of kids. There'd be about 6 kids in a van, a 2-seater van, back full of kids, full of crabs, full of lobsters, all hell broke loose, you know. Oh, go faster, go faster. Everything all over the place, bloody crabs legging it all over. And that was good fun. I enjoyed that.
We were once asked when we were under crab stalls, if you hadn't done this, what would you like to do? If you could do anything, what would you like to do? And I said, I'd love to be able to play golf. That was followed by a quick, sharp clip round the back of the neck and said, you've got ideas above your station. End of story. And I think that was it. This down here, when you were kids, you played in among crab pots, you watched old fishermen making drift nets, herring nets. There was fish boxes. The herring fleet would come and load up, and as it went round a corner, some herrings would drop off, and you would go pick them up as kids, turn the fish box over, lay them out and sell them to the visitors, a penny herring, or 1 1/8 a herring. But if some other kids were selling them cheaper, you quickly put them together, 4 for a penny. And that's how you were. That was your heritage. You see, nobody ever seemed to teach you anything. They expected you knew.
We used to jump off the top of the warehouses into the piles of nets. Now the warehouses would be about 30 foot high, but jump off now, we'd break your neck. The fish boxes, we used to have fish box dens. They used to come, you still get the fish boxes down there, albeit a lot of them are plastic now. There used to be wooden ones. They all had the butts, like Alliance Fisheries written on them. All the different people used to have their own boxes. The herring boxes used to come and there used to be hundreds and hundreds of boxes everywhere. All the kids were down there, got onto the top and we used to make dens inside them. When the pier man used to walk around, he always went, shh, shh, shh. And of course he could hear us, so he used to put the hosepipe on us over the top of the boxes, and there was all hell break. There was kids squeaking, shrieking, running all over, absolutely soaking wet through. You'd get home, what have you been doing? Playing on the pier. You've been messing about, haven't you? No, no.
If you went home and said, I've been in trouble today at school, you got a clip. If you went home and said, a policeman stopped me, you got a damn good clip. Your parents didn't have time to sit you down and talk you through it. You got a clip round lug, and that was the end of the story.
We used to go to Castle and play. There was, we hadn't toys like they have now.
Like we have today. Used to put a rope round a chimney, round a gas thing. Yeah.
Or a rope round a gas
Gas
lamp.
lamp. Swing on.
And swing round and round that. Yeah. And then we had a piece of rope from a tree up dike, which I think it's still there, isn't it?
Yeah, some of it is.
We used to swing on that. We used to swing out and come back again till it snapped, and then we used to play with umbrellucks, make pellets out of them, and make a round ring,
like
didn't we? And a den. And we used to have wars. Lads were in one lot, lasses were in another. We used to fire pellets at one another.
The happiest things, I think, was going down on the sand, making sandcastles, and going down on the scars and paddling in the pools. I enjoyed that. And I enjoyed walking from Robiners Bay to Browside, as they call it, and up the hill to Auntie's. And that was a special treat.
The harbour was our play area. Everything, we were always getting thrown off the pier for getting into dangerous situations, as all other generations of kids before me, and few afterwards still do. So it was very port orientated. The summertime, when the holidays came, the fishing herring boats came, which they don't do anymore, nicking the fish, selling it to the visitors. In fact, we even used to dismember herring and line them all up so people could see. We used to tell them which were the roes, which were the millets, you know, everything about the fish, and charge the visitors. We used to sell urchins, sea urchins, which we used to get off the boats. They used to fetch them in for us. And unfortunately, we used to bleach them in the baths, which Mum wasn't too happy about. But it was all down on the fish market during the winter time when they used to take the cobbles out. They used to put them on the piers to dry for the winter. Of course, that was marvellous, marvellous. Into the boats, piermen used to come on, clip your aunt lug, go on, bugger off home, I know your mother, I know your father.
My mother was the centre of the house. It revolved, as most other people's mothers. I mean, on a bad weather day, she would bake bread, and just to come in from school and open the door and smell that bread baking makes my mouth water now.
She used to stand there baking all afternoon.
By the time they come home,
Time
it
we
was
come
all
in
gone.
first one, grab. And then she used to say, it's a bloody waste of time standing here all afternoon baking for you lot.
Very hard at times.
Very hard.
Yeah, my mum used to have to,
She had to skein.
skin
We
mussels.
used to
didn't
bring
she?
mussels every morning to the house in a bag. When we got off to school, they'd tip them on a tray on the table and start skeining them,
To make money,
opening the
wasn't it?
mussels.
Yeah.
Then when we come back at dinner time for our dinner from Friarage School, she used to clip tray across to the side and give us our dinner. Maybe she'd had a pan of soap on, been doing soap whilst I was scaling mussels. We'd have our soap and then we'd go back to school again. When we came back at tea time, there were maybe caving lines. That was cleaning old bait off the lines. And then they'd have to bait. Oh, they went down to the warehouse, didn't they, to bait them? went down to warehouse to Bayton. It was a hard town. My mum had a hard life, very hard.
All the women interviewed commented upon how hard the life was, yet none complained about the difficulties they faced. At the height of the trawling industry during the 1950s and 60s, fishermen were away from home for several weeks. When they did return, it was party time for a few days before the men set sail once again. Yet for the women, there was still the day-to-day work to be done. One man, recently interviewed, summed up this situation when he said that men had a tough time at sea, followed by a few days' rest on shore. The women never rested, but they accepted the men's need for occasional relaxation because they risked their lives every time they went to sea.
It was part of a fisherman's wife's duty, shall we say, to, be part of her husband's fishing activities.
If you married a fisherman, you were expected to skein. So you were up early every morning, winter months, very, very cold, and we had sacks of mussels to prepare.
It was hard, but it was interesting when you first started doing it. But as the morning went along, you'd think, oh, well, is there no end to it, But it was a very interesting job.
To skein mussels, my mother used to just make me stand at the edge of the table and watch. And as soon as you felt that you saw how she did it and you could do it, you picked the knife up and you started.
We did this with a knife which was like a shorn-off table knife, and we just had the shells and broke them off.
I used to put the knife in, round, open the mussel up, and then take the mussel out into a dish.
There was an art in opening mussels. If you ragged them, if you tore them, they were no good to beta. They couldn't put them on the hooks fast enough or good enough.
The mussel has to be whole to put on the hooks on the line. But it was, like I say, it was hard, but it was interesting. It was very back-aching though, job. You used to be sat for a certain length of time doing it, in a certain position all the time. Because from the knees, you used to wear your balm skin, but you always still got wet. So I think you got arthritis through it and that. And it has also affected your fingers and your shoulders and that. Because you were in one position like all the time. That's the way we used to skein. Balm skin over the overall and then rubber gloves. But we were warm as well because we used to have a coke stove, and we used to fill that up. But the trough here used to be full all the time from us going in there to coming out. We used to more or less skein about 8 buckets, 8 or 9 buckets of mussels.
There was a lot of competition, but it was good, genuine, honest competition. Like to shoot a line, you used to get a young man saying, "Oh, I can shoot 3 lines in an hour." And that was good. Then you'd get the baiters saying, "Well, it takes me an hour and a half to bait a line." Always between skippers and crews, there was this competition. I said we started off with 12 lines. We did. We finished up taking 24, only because other boats would take 2 more and catch more fish, so we'd go. And this happened all the way around the harbour. It was good competition. You caught more fish. You even worked harder. But the camaraderie between everybody was second to none.
You know, if somebody was poorly in one of the sheds or anything, or they were ill, if you knew that person were doing it on their own, you would offer to help. You know, once you get done, like I did, you know, we would help. And vice versa, they would come and help us, you see. So it was, they were quite good at that, and there never used to be any qualms or anything like that.
It's been a standing joke in our family that my husband, when he asked me to marry him, first of all he asked how many lines I could bait a day and how many bags of mussels. And very proudly I told him, and he said, you'll do.
The baiting, it was there was lines they used to have on the table, and they were so high, and they were just filled with hooks about so big, you know, to put the mussels on. And they used to put about 2 or 3 mussels on the hooks, each hook. So you can just imagine it was quite a few mussels you needed to bait one line.
The first time I ever baited a line, I was 7 years old, and I couldn't reach the bench because as you bait, the line comes up. So they turned the fish box upside down so I could stand on it to reach the top of the line.
Mum taught me how to bait the lines, and they were straight, which my uncle used to, work of art, marvellous, because they could sheet them overboard easy, because they used to do it by hand, whereas now they have haulers that take the lines over. Obviously, if they were straight, they were easy, and they didn't get wrapped into the fingers because it was so easily to get pulled overboard.
Well, I think by the time they'd all done the work, they were really, really tired. But if anything ever went wrong, everybody was there for everybody else. If there was a boat in distress, I've known keel boats go out with the lifeboat to try and help. And women have got together ashore like that.
I often got phone calls from other wives who were obviously concerned or just wanted to know what's happening. We also had a radio, so although I couldn't speak to the lifeboat, I could hear what was going on. On occasions, quite a few women have congregated in our house so we could all listen together. And when I first came to Queen Street to live, Angela was about 18 months old. And I'd always promised Graham that I would never go to the cliff top and worry if he wasn't home and the lifeboat went and it was bad weather. But when I first came to live in Queen Street and the lifeboat went, one of the ladies opened the front door and shouted, "Aren't you coming?" And they all just went down to Cliff Top, you see, to watch. So I thought, well, I want to be part of this community. So I turned off the dinner and down I went with the baby. And under Flamborough Cliffs, we could see this blue cobble and the lifeboat heading for it. Graham was still fishing at the time. Well, all these women on the cliff top, you see, watching. "Oh, it's your fella," they said to me. "They're going for him." So, of course, I was really worried. But they weren't going for him. He was already ashore, but I didn't know it. He'd come home, found the dinner just turned off and the house abandoned. So he then worried as to what had happened. He walked down to Cliff Top, and there was me, obviously worried about this other boat, but thinking it was Graham. So I promised him there and then that, I would just carry on my life as normal. And if the lifeboat went, well, it just got on with its job, and I did.
When the lifeboat used to go out, you used to hear the rocket and you used to think, oh, somebody's broken down. Or, oh, it's gone out to tow a boat in. Then one day the lifeboat went out, and coming back into harbour, she turned over and 3 men were lost. It was terrible. I was about 11-year-old at the time. It was just terrible. It was as if the whole world stood still. Our world stood still. And ever after that, whenever the lifeboat was launched, and we all knew she was coming back in, everybody stopped baiting in warehouses for some reason. And we all used to go out on the pier and watch her come through harbour mouth. And that just seemed as if that happened after she'd turned over. Looking back, I think perhaps we took everything for granted. And then one day it was wrong. So we did used to watch her in after that.
As a child, we lived at Spurn Point, and my dad was the second coxswain in the lifeboat there, and my uncle was the coxswain. But launching the lifeboat at Spurn was quite different to Filey, because it went on a slipway. Filey, it was, and still is, hauled into the sea on a tractor and carriage. And sometimes I've seen some quite nasty launches where, you know, I didn't like to watch. But there was only one where I couldn't stop and watch, and it was after we'd had our first child, and it was a really bad launch, and we went down to watch it. But I honestly thought they wouldn't come back that day, and I couldn't watch that. And the on secretary, I could hear him on because we had a radio, so we could keep tabs on what was going on. And he just kept saying, "Filey lifeboat, please take extreme care." And I never heard it before, and I've never heard it again. And it wasn't a very nice experience, but they all came back.
You knew when it was bad weather. You knew when it came bad weather. And sometimes you heard some of the older men say, "Somebody's going to cop for it today." That used to turn your stomach. But to say you were worried all the time they were at sea, no. It never entered your head it could happen to you. Unfortunately, it's happened a few times in Scarborough, and the shock that's gone through the community's been horrendous. But you never actually think it's you.
Yeah, it took a long while to settle in. You weren't accepted straight away. I was actually, an old fisherman just said to me the other day that, "Oh yeah, you were one at turnip wallers or a tatey picker," or because I came from out of town. I wasn't of this area. "Oh yeah, we know Tom Wallace married a turnip waller," I think he called me. And I said, "What do you mean?" So he said, "Well, you come from Malton, didn't you?" You know, so yeah, and then when I first started going into the pubs, my husband was really strict that he wouldn't take me in a pub until I was 18. So I never went in a pub. On my 18th birthday, I went in a pub. That was the day we got engaged as well. And his grandmother said to me, "Let's have a look at ring then." Then she said, "Oh, our so-and-so," 2 of her sons, I think, had been engaged a few times. "So when this done with ring, I'll have it for collection." Well, that's good, you know, I've just got engaged, I'm going to get married. And no, I didn't feel accepted for quite a while. My brother-in-law, one of my younger brother-in-laws, said to me when a member at family died, and I must have been in the family about 6 or 7 years then, and he said, "I think you are one of our family now, aren't you?" I did feel one of the family, but it was just funny it was put into words. And so, no, I didn't feel accepted straight away. And but I did make myself known. I'm not a shy person. So, yeah, I soon got involved in the community.
I was going to the cliff top one day and I got my son in my arms, and a fisherman pulled me up and he turned round and he says, "You can be accepted as a Philonian now, you've had a son." So, you know, I couldn't believe when he said that. I thought, well, that is the first time that I've been approached and it had been said. But I didn't know, other than that being approached that day, that it was something they believed in.
I was very fortunate to marry the fisherman I got. No, it never entered my head I'd ever marry anyone other than a fisherman. You see, if you were a girl, there wasn't much use for girls. They couldn't go to sea, they couldn't carry the family line down. We weren't mistreated or anything like that, but you couldn't do any of those things. And you were very, very protected. I mean, my mother wouldn't let me go above the market. When I was younger, you had to stay down this end. You couldn't go up among posh people. It wasn't allowed. You belonged this end, you stayed this end.
East Sandgate, it runs right down to the harbour. It's a steep hill, and as you come off the pier, you look straight across the road. There's the harbour bar, and alongside the harbour bar is this hill, and it's what they used to call, the locals called it Pump Hill, the fishing fraternity, and they used to say, "Oh, she's from above the pump," because I was born in William Street, and I wasn't, as I say, didn't realise, I suppose, how they lived and we lived, really.
It's changing quite dramatically down here now. A lot of the older ones that were the fishing people are dying. You know, that it's a long time ago now. We've got a lot of people coming from down south moving in, buying the properties. The properties have gone out of the roof for the price-wise. The youngsters can't afford to buy them, and a lot of the younger ones are moving further out of the community. There's not many bottom enders left down here now that are actually called the people that were born down here. There's not many left at all.
I mean, to see the cobbles on the cobble landing now, there's hardly any there at all to what there was. And like we used to skein and that, all of us, all that's gone, you see. So they more or less go potting now, or netting, you know, like trawling the nets. And I think that, with the skeining and that going, I think the tradition has just gone. And when you walk on cobble landing now and there's no sign of, you don't see any fish or anything like that, you know, it's sad, really.
When Graham was fishing back in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of cobbles down there. Unfortunately now there's, 4 or 5, I think. It's about it, because it's virtually died now as the industry, as we knew it particularly. They don't skein and bait like we did. It's crabs and lobsters that they're the main thing, and salmon in summer. So it's very different, but it still happens down on Cobble Landing.
It's just a shame that it's just not there now. I mean, me and my husband go down there for walks, and you see the cobbles coming in, and when he used to go off, I mean, the seagulls, there used to be just one mass swarm of seagulls around them. They couldn't get the gutting done, you know, and there's just nothing now. You see the cobbles coming in, but you hardly see any seagulls. So therefore, you can guarantee that they probably haven't got a lot.
The making of fishermen's ganses is a dying art, although there are still a few women who continue the tradition. They talk here about the early days when almost every woman in a fishing family knitted, and they illustrate the knitting techniques and describe the symbols used in the garments.
Fishing towns around the UK do knit ganses. And this started off as a simple fact that when the fishermen went to sea, each town had its own pattern. And if anything, ever the fishermen were lost at sea, they were missing, they would wash up. The ganses are very hard wearing. They last for years and years and years. Ganses have been passed down families, they last that long. And if a fisherman was washed up on shore and was quite mauled, which they usually are if they've been in the sea a while, they could tell from which town they came from simply by looking at the Gansey pattern and say, right, oh yes, he's from Scarborough. Then they would look, it was either on the welt or on the cuff. They would, if it was Mick, they would have put MS. Oh, blooming heck, it's Mick Sheeder. Inform the wife, and that's basically how the patterns came along.
Each port had a different pattern. Filey, a beautiful fancy pattern, ropes and diamonds. Whitby was very ornate, ropes, diamonds and ferns. Scarborough was plain, a plain welt. And then when it got to the chest, it was 2 and 2 change, always with the saddle on the top.
Now, all the patterns on a Guernsey have a meaning. And this particular one has ropes, which are quite self-explanatory, that all fishermen use ropes in one way or another, whether to tie up the boats or tie on the crab pots. This stitch is called Betty Martin and is almost peculiar to Filey, but the history of it is unknown. We don't know who Betty Martin was. That's just something what's there. The steps, again, can be the steps down to the sea, steps in the harbour, or as some religious, or not particularly religious, but churchgoers would say, the steps to heaven. So they all have a meaning. This is shingle off the beach, the fine stones. We've got a diamond here. It's the mesh of the crab pots or the fishing nets. Several different diamonds. This one's an open diamond. The one that Graham's wearing is a filled diamond, so it's basically you just do what you want at the time. I know of one person in Filey who knits the Guernseys, and all her family Guernseys have an anchor in them. Another lady who's no longer with us, she used to put heart in hers. That's quite traditional in Flamborough, because the heart means the love of a wife for a husband, or the mother for a son, or so that was, you know, there's lovely meanings. And the Tree of Life is also another one, which is quite a nice idea, which is obviously self-explanatory.
Flamborough Ganses, there are about 5 different patterns, but they are really, really a pain in the neck because there's so many different patterns on them. You have, this is the fish scales, you have ropes, you have ladders, you have cables, you have sand, you have the fish scales, all in one jumper. So it's nightmare city.
They're also very hard wearing Guernseys. They knit double at the bottom, the edge of the neck and the sleeves, because that's where they get more wear and tear. The design also is plain at the bottom because that bottom piece can be taken off and repaired. So in the life of a Guernsey, you can put a new bottom in, you can put a new rib on, or you can put all that on without throwing it away. Again, with the sleeves are knit down, so it's quite easy to take off the sleeve from there and re-knit it. Meanwhile, all this is good. So they're made out of 100% pure Yorkshire wool. So, and they take a long time to knit. I timed myself only once, 96 hours. So you don't throw them away until, well, to be honest, I've never thrown a Guernsey away.
They usually take about 6 weeks to knit. They knit on 5 needles, and it's very intense knitting. I knit very tightly, so mine, you can't see through them, they're that dense. When you knit tightly, it means that you have to adjust your patterns, because obviously if you're knitting for a size 40 chest, if you knit tight, it turns out to be a 36 chest. So you have to adjust your pattern to compensate.
They're not oiled as some people believe. It's just the wool and the close knit which sort of turns the wind, as they say, and repels a shower. You don't often see a fisherman, or when they're wearing Guernseys, wearing a coat, because they're quite a warm Guernsey. The idea is, as I say, they are close knit, and close knit to the body as well. You know, there's no spare wool. You don't wear a loose Guernsey. That's not a traditional one.
My auntie used to knit Guernseys, but she would never tell me how to do. She would never help me. She would never tell me anything about it or how to carry on. I don't know why, but she wouldn't. So I picked it up myself. And that was where I worked, at the shop where I worked. The husband of the lady that had the shop, he had a Guernsey. And I can remember spreading it out on the table and counting the loops and measuring it. And I just said, one day I will knit you one. Of course, they all thought it was a huge joke, you see. But I did.
The first Guernsey that Graham had was knit by a neighbour of where he grew up, and she was of the fishing community. When Graham and I had been going out together for a few years, she said, if you're going to be serious, then you learn to knit a Guernsey. I was living in Leeds at the time because I was trained to be a nurse, and that's where I did my training. So Lizzie Hunter would teach me to knit. Now the needles I have are my granny's, and we knit these Guernseys on 5 needles. So Lizzie cast it on, because they're all knit in one piece, and she cast it on at the bottom, told me what to do, and when I got to there, I had to come back and she would show me the next stage. The next stage is basically stocking stitch, but with the initials in of the wearer. So I did that and I came back, and then she said, as they called it, set the pattern. And again I was told to, and each stage of the knitting I had to go away, do it, it was like homework, and come back, and Lizzie would show me the next step. So I knit the Guernsey, then it shapes under the arms for the gusset, and each stage I came back and Lizzie told me what to do.
Scarborough people used to wear a leather belt with padding on, with holes in, which they used to put those needles into, right, and go through like that. Other places would take these, put them under their arm, put the needle in there. That was the needle that you put into the other, you see. Like that, and knit like that. That's your straight needle that holds it straight.
But the one I have is a belt, goes around your waist, and it's just a sort of an oval like that with lots of holes in, packed with sawdust. One of my uncles, that was his job, to always make sure that there was another sheath ready for his mother. Because when she used to do the knitting, of course the sheath packed with sawdust, the sawdust would just disintegrate. So he always had to make sure that he'd swept up enough wood shavings and keep a sheath ready for her. She had 9 children, 6 sons, so she not only skeined and baited for the family, but she knit all the Guernseys for the boys and her husband. So she really couldn't be without a sheath always at the ready, because she, like everybody else, they didn't waste any time. And my granny always used one, because I can remember as a little girl worrying about her, because she would have her Guernsey tucked under her arm like this, and she'd be knitting, and every now and again she'd go like that. And I thought the needle was going into her side. And of course, because of her clothing and the knitting sheath, I couldn't see that, but she was actually putting the needle into the knitting sheath. It helps to take the weight because they're quite heavy garments.
Most fishermen had one to go to sea in and then one for Sunday. That was his Sunday best. And to see fishermen in navy blue jerseys with a white muffler around them is absolutely beautiful.
Well, fishermen like navy blue and the grey one for best on Sundays. And other people just had what they liked, you know, what colour they wanted. And it's 6 for one gentleman, all different colours.
As the Guernseys got older, they were then taken for working Guernseys. Grey was quite often a Sunday Guernsey. Navy blue was the working one. But he used to keep some for best. And as I say, as they got older, then they were taken for work. Graham's always worn a Guernsey, but the younger ones don't. Partly, I think, the art of knitting them is going. So that's partly why they don't wear them.
Entertainment opportunities were limited, but women did go out on Friday evenings, while the older women looked after the children, and Boxing Day was traditionally known as Ladies' Day.
We went out on a Friday night or Saturday night and met up with all the other fishermen and the wives. Always the same pubs, always the same people, always the same conversation when I think about it now. But we loved it. It was just our social thing. And yeah, so lots of the wives that going to school, etc., go for a coffee if you had time, pop into my house, pop into their house. Yeah, so we had quite a nice social life, really.
We used to always go out on a weekend and always meet like-minded people, shall we say, the fishermen and the wives and things like that. And that's really what our social life was in Filey.
You used to go out on a Friday night. If you'd had a good week, you went out on a Friday night. And if you'd had a really good week, you used to have a 1 and 6 supper at Jack and Alice in Main Street. And that was your treat.
Oh yes, because on Saturday nights we dressed up, you know, and the fishermen went out in their suits, not collar and ties, still in the Guernseys, but they always went out with a suit, and the ladies always, that was my treat. I used to go to hairdressers on a Saturday, and so yes, Saturday was, we felt more, you know, part of the in crowd, shall we say, and after working hard all week.
At that period of time, I think we used to meet at dances because there was dances just about every night of the week at one venue or another. Although fishermen only ever went to dances in St Thomas's Church Hall, which is next door, and that's where we used to go to dances as well. So.
The pub on a Friday night. I never went in the pub.
I did. Well, I didn't met
21
Fred worked in, he was away at North Shields. And I was in pub with my mum at Leeds Hotel. And he came through.
Yeah, at Star Hotel now, 21.
And then he said, he bought us, me and my mum a drink, because I hadn't seen him for years. He bought me and my mum a drink, and we sat talking. Then he said to me mum, can I take her for a walk up front? He did! My mum, if he could take me for a walk up. We went for a walk up front, and we sat in, you know where? Grandatelli's.
Yeah.
Just below there, as you're going up zigzag.
It's a shelter.
There was a farm there. And he says to me, within a year from now I'm going to get married to you. I said, that's what you think. And I lost my brooch out of my coat. I still have it anyway. I lost the brooch out of my coat. I must have been having a snug. And next morning I says to him, I had a blue brooch in my coat. I says, I've lost it. I said, it must be in front of that farm. And he went on and I'd have walked and he fetched it back. He brought my brooch back and I still have it.
They didn't really go to dances, they went to pubs. They just went to the pub and if they knew a girl that was going to be at the dance, like he knew I would be there, then he'd go to the pub and quite a few of his friends had come and meet us girls there. But no, they never went out intentionally to go dancing, no. And then he couldn't dance either. They just used to stand around.
We used to go to the pictures or there was the Olympia Dance Hall, and everybody used to go there. And children from much farther afield, they used to come into town and go dancing at the Olympia. Everybody used to get there.
No, we never had no money, did we?
Just say.
You also had Saturday penny.
Oh, we used to try and go to Olympia on a Friday night. If my mum had any money, she'd let us go.
If
she had any money. And if she hadn't any money, we used to natter or go around looking for a lemonade bottle or a beer bottle to take back to get a few pennies. Yeah. But 9 times out of 10 we went. We used to go to Olympia, which was along there, on seafront.
Boxing Day was the only day, I think, in my life I could ever remember my mother being drunk. And it was a Boxing Day.
Boxing Day,
it used to be just for women,
Women's Day out.
No fellas used to go out then.
Yeah, fellas were supposed to look after kids.
They used to get dressed up, fancy hats. All the rest of it was a fun day. No arguing, no carrying on. And women used to go out together, have a kitty. We had a millionaire's purse that opened up like that and closed back up again. You all put so much in the kitty and you went out without your husband. And you went from pub to pub. You weren't necessarily drinking all the time. It was the atmosphere as well. Everybody was in a fun frame of mind. No fights, no carryings on. Unfortunately, it's not like it was now.
Involvement with the religious institutions was irregular, although all thought it important to attend churches or chapels for significant rites of passage. All fishing communities had local churches or chapels that were recognised as being our churches, and the smaller ports such as Staithes and Filey had strong attachments to Methodism. On the one hand, popular religion was pervasive. Superstitions and a wide variety of customs, folklore, rituals and practices suggest a community very much aware of the fragility of life and the need for some form of spiritual security.
They were very superstitious. Well, if they met a nun, they'd turn back. If they met a woman with a cross eye, so they would.
Cross-eyed woman, really big style, no-go area. If you see a cross-eyed woman, go back home, don't go to sea.
They're very superstitious. I don't know whether they are today, but they were in those days. Very. And they meant it. They would go straight back home.
My dad's very superstitious and still is. He's still quite harbour orientated. Every day he walks around the harbour and he's always checking. He's still in work mode. He still goes to the yacht club on a Sunday just to listen to all what's going on with the Far Harbour and everything. Dad was, well, he still, as I say, still is superstitious. He won't let you whistle. A whistling woman and a crowing hen drives the devil out of his den.
If you whistled, you were whistling up the wind. A lot of men going to sea couldn't whistle. My father-in-law told me he was never allowed to whistle aboard a boat he was on. It's whistling upwind.
If you saw a priest on the way down, turn around, go back home. It was awful. And this, as I say, is still like that now, albeit he's 74 and he hasn't been onto the harbour for a while. It's still like that.
The one word that couldn't be mentioned in our house, and I can't mention it now because I still feel it, is a curly tail. The 3-letter word for a curly tail or a sow, you cannot say it. It starts with P and finishes with G. If you said that at home, it was the worst possible thing, and I won't have it said in my home now.
Curly tail, long tail and bobtail. Curly tails, excuse me, Dad, is the pig. Now, my dad won't even eat bacon. He will not eat wallop, that's it, no chance.
You know, when Christ was preaching and he found the man that was insane, possessed of a devil, he cast the devil out of him and turned to see where he could put it. There was a herd of swine on the hillside and he cast it into them. They run off the hillside and went into the sea. That's where it originated from.
Bobtails are rabbits. He won't even entertain that. We used to have to tell him when we boiled them for the dogs, it's chicken. It's chicken, Dad, it's not bunnies, you know. And longtails obviously are rats, which that goes back to leaving the sinking ship. Rats would come off on shore if there was something wrong with the boat.
You couldn't say the 3-letter word for longtail or rabbit. You called one bunny, longtail, curly tail. When I was a bairn, I had books and I'd turn a page for them and it was torn out because there was actually a curly tail on the next page. And you couldn't say them. You weren't allowed to.
I still do say longtails, bobtails and curly tails. I don't think I'm very superstitious with a lot of other things. Not really, not now, no. I do know of them all, but they don't really bother me.
You couldn't wind wool after 6 o'clock at night or knit. You were winding sailors to the bottom of the sea. You couldn't knit after 6 o'clock at night. You were forcing them down to the bottom of the sea.
When we were in Grimsby, I'd never heard of it before, but the day the men went to sea, they didn't allow their wives to do the washing because it said they always thought that it would wash them away. They wouldn't come back. So, and it was a big one, was that in Grimsby.